I'm going to squeeze behind you really quick. Oh, I can. You're good.
Right. I was hoping to see you. Well, all right, you guys. We got about 9 minutes after, and we are very excited. Audriana, where did you drive down from?
Ypsilanti.
From Ypsilanti to be with us today. And she did that because she works for an organization and she's familiar with one of the least talked about, most severe problems in our society today. And the very first step to addressing any problem is awareness.
Absolutely.
And so we are so glad that you got up early and that you came to be with us. And Audriana, as she will explain in her own credentials, what she does, how she got there, but what we can do is welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here today, no matter how far the drive or the time, because it is important, right? And it's important to put these little bugs out there so that we can all, one, intercept when we see something going on, know where to turn to if ourselves or someone else needs support, and just be more aware of our community resources, because the reality is intimate partner violence, also known as domestic violence or relationship abuse, teen dating violence. Decades ago, the battered women's movement, right? We know that it's been seen as a family issue, but the reality is it's a community issue, and it's an epidemic. And so I really, really appreciate the invite today. I want to confirm, do we still want to stop on the same time?
Around 9:45, because some of these guys, you got to go to choir.
Nope,
choir's done.
Choir, remember?
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere.
Still, we got this.
Maybe, okay, go ahead.
I got you. So my name is Audriana Buchanan-Cronk. I've been with First Step for almost 10 years now. I started as a children's advocate, working with children, navigating our services, whether they'd been impacted by intimate partner violence in their homes, maybe their families were separating, maybe one of the guardians or adults in their home who was hurting the other adult was getting arrested or needing to stay away from the family, right? So talking about grief and anger and safety and their own relationships as they get older. After that, I went to work still for First Step, but in Kim Worthy, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, specifically focused on addressing the backlog of rape kits found in 2011 when they found that warehouse with over 11,000 kits dating back decades that were just forgotten about. From there, I've moved into more of our nonprofit management side. I'm currently our Director of Operations and Engagement, and I'm here today for the engagement piece, just making sure our community is aware of what's happening, what's going on in our communities specific to Michigan, and how First Step helps address that. And I will make sure that I note some of our other sister agencies in case folks outside of Wayne County or farther away, or maybe you're traveling or have family out of the state, how can you find them support with their local providers? So before I go into really talking about the dynamics as First Step sees it occurring, I wanted to share a little bit more about First Step. So we are celebrating 48 years this year. We are very proud of the services we've expanded to, but we actually started back in 1978 by a group of women who were sheltering women being abused in their own homes. So they would invite these women who needed to flee into their own homes to offer safety. And from there, we were able to obtain our own shelter. We've since moved to a few shelters. We used to have like an old farmhouse. The foundation was crumbling. In 2008, we were able to move to this beautiful facility. And now we own 2 properties in Wayne County, and we have satellite offices across the county as well. So though we are the largest provider in the state and our services say, we serve Wayne County, we serve Southeast Michigan, right? We know that there are survivors and folks who need services who are maybe relocating to Wayne County. Maybe their supports are in Wayne County. Maybe they work in Wayne County or go to school, or maybe this county that they're in is no longer safe for them to receive services at due to their perpetrator's abuse. So though we always want to connect folks with their local provider, because we know in most cases, they're going to have the strongest connections within their county. They're going to be able to, ideally, there's less barriers to getting to those services, if they need to drive somewhere, things like that. But we do not have any qualifications, eligibility requirements regarding residency, citizenship, age, sex, gender, sexual orientation, nothing like that, or socioeconomic status. Our services are free and they're available to anyone. And the reality is are you joining us?
Come on in, Thomas. Come on in, Thomas. Here, we got your seat right back here.
Of course. Welcome, welcome. So the reality is, right at the end. Sorry, all the other. I was just so popular, I filled up all the seats.
There you go.
Do you want me to move that, please?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So the reality is no one is immune to violence. And so one of the myths that I work to bust is that historically we've been known as a women's shelter along with many of our other providers, but many of us don't just serve women, and we're not just a shelter, as you can see. Shelter is actually about 5% of our services. We serve about 6,000 individuals a year, and yes, last year we were able to provide over 20,000 nights of safe shelter through our emergency shelter for children and adults, and through our animal shelter that we have on site, and our transitional housing program, where we pay for individuals and families rent for up to 2 years while working to get them sustainability long after we're involved. Beyond that, our 24-hour helpline is our most notable and used resource because it's 24 hours, right? You can't predict when these things happen. You can't predict when someone has something they need or when they have that time to call. Right? And so if you are seeking resources just because you want to get to know First Step more familiar, or you're looking for something specific to support a friend or family with, you can even call our helpline if you're not yourself seeking. But our services are empowerment based. So if someone is impacted by these crimes and is wanting advocacy, counseling, support groups, check on shelter space, they do need to call. Okay? Because we have a lot of people in the world that want to help others, but the reality is those survivors already have lost so much power and control in their own lives, and they might not be ready for these steps, and that's okay. But we need to make sure that they're the ones leading these things, because the reality is that it's very dangerous to address intimate partner violence in your own relationships. It's very dangerous to start to plan to leave. And that's actually, I have a slide later, but that's actually the most lethal time for survivors is when they are leaving or the few months after they've left. So it really needs to be driven by that empowerment and their readiness, because they know their lives the best. They've been surviving every day up until now, and they know their abuser the best. Okay. So really empowering them. And so I just recommend letting them know these resources are there, that our goals are not for them to leave necessarily. We can still offer safety planning, risk reduction, resources, education, support for the children. And beyond that, if that is not on their goal list yet or the ability to obtain yet. So I mentioned counseling and advocacy. The other piece on this side is a big piece for us, our criminal court advocacy. So I just said all of our services are empowerment based, right? For example, CPS loves to tell us they mandated someone to come. We don't do that. I'll play the game. I'll pretend, but it's all about survivors wanting to be involved, because that's going to do the true support and work.
So you don't receive court appointed.
The court does not mandate people to go to domestic violence counseling or advocacy. CPS tries to. The court will require abusers to go to batterers intervention or anger management. So those are court appointed in Wayne County.
Okay. Thank you.
And we do not offer services to perpetrators. So survivors, for example, in CPS.
So when you say court advocacy,
yep.
Tell me what you do in regard to that.
So this would be our district courts. So folks, victims that are identified through police reports, the dockets for courts, our advocates this is the only program where we reach out and say, hey, we saw something may have happened with your partner, your ex-partner, whoever. First Step exists. We're not affiliated with the court. We're not affiliated with the police.
So you initiate that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. They can also initiate, but in a lot of cases, we're reaching out and saying, hey, we're here and you're not alone if you'd like our help. So maybe that's a survivor walks into the police department and says, hey, I'm looking to file a police report. The police that we have partnerships with can say, well, First Step's here. Why don't you talk about what that looks like? What does that mean for you? What could come from that? What are your goals? And is that actually Because a lot of people will say things like, go get a PPO, not realizing PPO is a piece of paper. And if that person wants to harm you and that's going to push them over the edge, and that survivor is going to have a better pulse on if that's going to escalate him or her or, their ex versus just a lay person saying, yeah, go get a PPO. That's going to solve everything, right? And so these advocates are stationed across Wayne County to intercept through the legal system and just say, hey, we're experts in the field. We're here to help you. You don't have to do this alone. And what does that look like? So maybe it's attending court with them. Maybe it's working as a liaison between the prosecutor. We see a lot of subpoenas for survivors to go testify against their abuser, but First Step knows that the abuser's been breaking into their house every night and threatening them, right? And we know that they've been showing up and threatening to take their kids and things, so trying to advocate on their behalf. Yes, I'm sorry that I made you hold your hand for so long.
No, I'm fine. I just wondered, is there ever situations where the victim, in their own self-defense, ends up being prosecuted?
Mhm.
And you advocate for them in those situations?
Absolutely. So just because we get a police report that says, I don't even remember defendant, and then, or they'll say victim and perpetrator or whatever they call the abuser on the side, we don't just take it as, well, this person was identified as the victim by the police. We really read the report. Sometimes we're doing a little bit of extra research. Sometimes we already have these people in our system or they're already our clients, right? But sometimes too, we make the wrong call and we start working with someone and we're like, this is clearly the perpetrator, right? And so having to switch. But yes, we will support. And unfortunately, there are times where clients still get prosecuted. I mean, I think 2 years ago was a really hard time for First Step. We had a survivor we'd been working with for a really long time. And unfortunately, the courts in the state of Michigan at this time don't take into account abuse that might be experienced. For example, like human trafficking survivors, we see if they retaliate, save their lives, protect themselves against their pimps or so forth, that they often are still being convicted of. Yes.
Yeah.
Now there is a groundwork movement. I'm going to pin this. This is not my field, but I do appreciate what they're doing. Survivors of Justice Act is a grassroots effort trying to model something that went well in Georgia and making it happen in Michigan to make our courts have better laws and new laws to look at not just active cases being convicted, but actually backlog different things to really reconsider. It's called like second look, essentially. It's not actually a second look bill, but it's similar to that if you've heard of that. To look at these people's cases and say, well, what was actually happening during this time to make this happen? Were you being sexually abused as a child by this person, right? Were they then threatening your child, right? Was there abuse or trauma linked to this?
What's the statute of limitation issues on those kinds of situations?
I can't speak to that right now, because
there
those.
was statute of limitation at one time, but I thought they were trying to get rid of it.
I think she said it's not her bailiwick.
Yeah, and also like us, Representative Breen actually has like a multi-dozen bill package right now for human trafficking. So they're trying to change a bunch of things, even just changing the word prostitute to human trafficking survivor. So there's a lot of, unfortunately, like outdated bills at this time that aren't trauma informed.
We met because the PPO in Michigan currently, if you get a PPO, you have to serve it.
You have to.
The cops will serve it for you. Most every
or
state,
you
the
can
cops
pay
will serve it.
them off the clock
But how
if they want
expensive are
to
they?
do it.
You mean to tell me that you have to go take your PPO
To
that
the
you're
abuser.
So there's 3 options. So also I just testified on that. So the House finally brought it up. So that's really exciting. So hopefully it's on the agenda soon for voting because it already passed in the Senate. We're waiting for the House to pass it. But so essentially personal protection, when we have a personal protection order advocate. So if anyone impacted by intimate partner violence or sexual assault needed a PPO, they can call First Step, and not only can our helpline support them, but they can have an advocate walk through the process, talk about serving, talk about if the person that it's petitioned for wants to try to terminate it, so they can be more informed, because that's a really scary process, right? But the 3 ways you can get PPOs in Michigan served are to identify, like serve it yourself, which that's silly when I'm saying I'm scared of this person and I don't want to have contact with them. Second, identify another adult, someone 18 and older, to serve it for you, but you still have to get things like notarized, right? So there's still additional, it's just not, can't just be like, hey, here, I hand you this paperwork, we're done. And then the third one is you can pay a professional to do it. Law enforcement in our county are not accustomed to wanting to be involved. They really shift it to the Wayne County Sheriff's Department that has the lowest fees, thankfully, but our county, is very big. And so I did the math. If I lived in Belleville and you have to pay from the Detroit office for the Sheriff's Department, and oftentimes these assailants, if they're willing to harm their loved ones, they're often willing to also dodge police. So they often have to attempt multiple times. Technically, the law says attempt 3 times. That doesn't always happen, but if the Sheriff's Department's decent, so that could be up to $500 to try to get it served, and you might not even promise that it was served. And then what happens after it's served, right? But
First step, help pay for that?
we do not have the funding. We did for about a year and a half. It was amazing. We had a partnership with HR processing service. So then there's this whole issue about there's third parties that have been like, oh, I can make a buck. So these contractors have come out of nowhere and they show up at the court and they wear things that say court appointed. And the judges, after they get PPOs petitioned, they'll say, oh yeah, go to these process servers, like right out the door. These people, not all of them, but First Step knows there are certain companies that are taking these survivors' money and then dodging their calls. We have no proof that they're serving. We have no proof. And if you can imagine going to have a PPO served and you need to know if your person's been served or not, that is going to change your safety plan. That is going to change your behaviors, because the minute they're served, depending on that person, their personality could switch, right? Their intentions could switch. So it's really scary. And those process servers are actually hundreds of dollars at times just for one attempt. And a lot of them don't show proof of service, or it's a really big problem.
Where does the budget come from for First Step?
First Step is 70% federally and state funded. Victims of Crime Act is about 45% of our budget. It comes from a federal pot that is not tax dollars. It actually was this really creative, in my opinion, workaround back in the 80s where the government said, you know what, when we criminalize and convict white collar crimes, part of their fines and penalties are going to go into this bucket of money to give out to victim service providers across the country to serve victims of crime, right? So really creative. Unfortunately, what have we seen in the last decade or so? Lack of attention to white collar crime, more plea deals, right? So less money going into that bucket. So the state of Michigan last year and this year has seen a 40% reduction in VOCA dollars coming to our state. Our Division of Victim Services under DHHS funnels most of our federal money for all of our sister agencies. So First Step is the largest in the state. There's about 70 something more of us, right? There's small tribal focused ones. There's sexual assault versions, right? There's dual roles like ours where it's domestic and sexual violence. So we're all getting this VOCA money. We're lucky that we have a little bit more flexibility in our funding. 30% is on private donations or foundations. We're very lucky. Some of our sister agencies up north are smaller orgs. The ones in more rural areas are 90% VOCA reliant. So when we're talking about seeing a huge chunk of reductions on top of what we've already seen the last 2 years, for example, FEMA usually pays our food for the shelter, about $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Last year, we were awarded that money. It never showed. No one's there to answer the calls. No one's answering emails out of that department because I'm not sure they work there anymore. This year, the awards were never even brought out for us to apply to. And so now we're seeking funding ourselves to try to cover that cost. And that has been very, very similar across other dollars that were once reliable for First Step, HUD-related dollars that are caught up in court, other funders that you funneled down from other federal things that the budgets have been cut. So unfortunately, we're about to see a really big hit this fall. And so we're actually trying to work with our legislators to have the state step in, but the state has been very clear that they're in a $1 billion shortfall. So we better get going though.
So you do have foundation support.
Yes. So like McGregor's a really strong partner.
Okay.
Dunning, Dresner, But at this point, what's happening is we have to find new money because
Have you talked to Ford?
Ford,
The New York Ford, not the local.
I was going to say the local Ford changed their mission years ago.
Yes, no,
They're philanthropic measures. I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar to me.
You ought to look at it.
Okay.
They have to give $160 million a year in Detroit. And
Okay.
They have a hard time doing it.
Oh, well, let's write that down. Let me take that information to our new director of philanthropy. I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm about to have a baby any minute. So I want to make sure that information gets to where I need it so I have a job when I come back.
You're not going to do it here, I hope.
I hope not either. I hope not. I am about to be 9 months, but hey, if it was like my last pregnancy, we're good. I got it handled, but no. So yeah, that's just a little bit. But the reality is First Step does not have case managers. We walk alongside survivors. Okay, they are the drivers. I just might be in the passenger seat with a map that helps educate them on their options. But at the end of the day, it's their choices, and that matters because they know their lives the best. They've been surviving it every day from here. They know what resources they have access to. They know how their identity might play into it, right? For example, I can't look at my Detroit clients and say, well, just call 911. Do you know how many times I've had survivors say, I called 911 and they never showed?
Yeah.
Right? So that's why it's also important. My advocates out in the community work in certain places because then they know their community's the best. And they can say, listen, this prosecutor doesn't care if you don't want to prosecute. They're going to subpoena you. So how do we prepare you for that? Right? This prosecutor will listen to you. Right? So what do you want to say to them? What do you want them to know? What does justice look like for you? Right? And so that's really important because unfortunately, we live in a society that says these systems are supposed to be unbiased and whatnot, but depending on where you go, it's going to happen differently. And I hate to bring down your guys' lovely Sunday, but domestic violence is actually a misdemeanor in the state of Michigan.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a misdemeanor.
Doesn't matter the severity of the violence?
Man, you might get it to a felony. You might.
So it's a Class A?
Yep. And there is a loophole. I would love this bill to get addressed. There's a loophole that it's supposed to be intended for first-time offenders, but how it's written, they get away with using it multiple times. And I've seen offenders who have battered their partners and new partners time and time again, and they keep using this plea deal. So it's they take a plea for the misdemeanor, and they go to batterer's intervention because it's court appointed, and then if they finish the class, it gets removed from their record.
Oh, it's scrubbed.
Mm-hmm. So only the courts can see it. First Step knows if they were perpetrators of our client because we have them in their system. So then we have a new survivor come up and say, oh, here's my assailant's name. And we're like, why is that popping up in our thing? Oh, we just went to court last year and they just got expunged. And now they're doing it to someone else. And then they just keep doing it and getting it expunged.
Can you bring that? Are you allowed to publicize that?
The assailant? No.
You mentioned this, you clarified your remarks by saying this is an epidemic.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the data points that draw that conclusion?
Absolutely. So across the country, just the FBI actually just published. Thank you. I was going to do this once I don't trip on it, if you don't mind. There's actually the FBI just published a report for 2020 to 2024, and what they're saying across the country is that violent crime rates are actually going down. Right. A lot of that is really coming from we had a spike over the pandemic, and now we're seeing, and people were in crisis. Right. People were desperate. People were confused. We're seeing that come down, but what's not coming down is domestic violence. So we're unclear if you imagine a pot of violent crime, and if violent crime generally is going down, that pot, is domestic violence just filling more of that stats because it's not going down, or is domestic violence actually increasing and making that number go up? So that's still very unclear. But what we do know and can confidently say is that we're not seeing a decline in the amount of people being affected by domestic violence. And what I can say for my county is I'm seeing an incline in the last few years since the pandemic of how violent it's getting within relationships. We do not necessarily have data that says, yep, there's more domestic violence, but what we can say is there's more use of weapons. I'm seeing a weird trend of knives. We have a huge issue with strangulation, which is very deadly. We've actually just had a woman in Canton was murdered by her live-in partner last year. And so First Step actually is on piloting Wayne County's first ever non-fatal strangulation program, where we're educating officers and healthcare workers and providing forensic examinations, just like a sexual assault exam, for strangulation cases, so that we can take it, ideally push the courts to take it more seriously in court too, because it is a lethal measure. Even though they didn't have a gun or a knife, that is attempting murder. So when you ask about what's happening, data typically is about 2 to 3 years behind. I don't know if you guys have ever done research state or federally. That's very typical. But what we do know is that we're looking around, over 20,000 victims just in Wayne County.
And just reported. How many percentage like reported versus non-reported in your experience?
Oh, a lot of people don't call the police.
Yeah, I mean, like, would you double this? I mean, what would you do?
Probably. And I also want to make sure we're talking about thinking about the term intimate partner violence. So our sister agencies and ourselves, intimate partner violence is different than the broad term of domestic violence. So that's important to think of too. So when you guys go out and look for numbers, make sure you're looking at if they're talking about just domestic of like 2 roommates in a home, or if they're talking about intimate partners, because those are going to change your numbers too.
So domestic violence is just like a brother or sister, or
legally the term. Okay. First Step Services is talking about a current or former partner, or maybe they share a child. Yep. Okay. It's hard to say, but what I can say is First Step, served 6,000 people, and that's just the people that knew about us. That's just the people who reached out or were referred. How many times have I met with survivors post, abuse or later that said, I could have really used you. I had no idea you existed, which that's a problem. We've been here almost 50 years and people don't know the resources in their community. That's terrible. But so intimate partner violence, I was just saying this, is specific to those in those relationships, and we're looking for patterns. Okay, so we're looking for patterns of behavior where one person is exerting power and control over someone else. So this isn't talking about a toxic relationship where 2 people just don't get along. They're both just not into each other, not treating each other well. Someone is using systems or children or technology or finances or emotional abuse and manipulation to maintain control over their partner, taking down their self-esteem, isolating them from family and friends, making them feel like they're crazy or that they're the problem. Maybe the abuser is using their power and their privilege in society. We see oftentimes people in positions of power and being like, look, no one's going to believe you, right? This is who I am. People love me, right? And this survivor goes out into the community and they're like, well, my family does love them and my friends do love them, or my colleagues think I have the best partner ever. Like, it must be me, or it's just, we're working through something in our relationship. We also hear a lot of myths about, well, if only they stopped drinking. Well, if only they stopped doing drugs. If they have really difficult mental health issues, so there's a lot to navigate. Or if only they weren't abused as a child or grew up in a home. And this is my big point, is how many people do we know who might use substances, who have mental health concerns, who had childhood trauma, and they don't abuse others? It is not an excuse. And so it's really important that we use, this is going to be really small text, but I apologize, that we use these different spokes to help survivors identify and to help each other call out behaviors that are founded in power and control. So something, I think the most common ones First Step works with is economic and financial. Financial abuse is in almost every single relationship, some way, some form. Not allowing someone to work, asking where their money goes. We work with survivors who can't come into our services because their mileage is being tracked. Because the person will just ask too many questions and be like, well, where'd you go? Why do I need to give you more gas money? Where have you been driving? Are you cheating on me? Sexual and reproductive, we see survivors, female survivors, when they're impregnated, maybe they didn't consent to that, maybe that wasn't their goal. We see the abuse escalate during pregnancy and post-pregnancy. And then, of course, now you have this child or children. That makes it more difficult to leave, makes it difficult to find more resources, shelter. Like we just had a family of 10 move into our shelter, right? That's really difficult to find a safe space to go, right? We're really lucky to be able to offer that. But imagine being in an abusive situation and being like, how am I supposed to care for 9 children? There's 4-month-old twins, right? How am I supposed to care for that and get to safety? Using systems, manipulating the courts. We're seeing a really big concern right now about abusers threatening ICE enforcement, even for if they're citizens. But if they just aren't white passing, we have a concern now, right? Using children, saying, well, I'm going to get full custody of the kids, or I'm going to have the kids full time, and whatnot. Spiritual and religious abuse, using the Bible or Quran against them, twisting words in it, telling them, well, I brought you to this church, and maybe they've built a community here now, and they're threatening of like, if you leave, you have to leave. You don't get to be a part of it. They're never going to believe you, or they want us to be together, right? Using maybe scriptures that don't promote separation, right? And missing the context of the safety side of it. Is there any questions about these?
And excuse, what's nonviolence mean?
What? I'm sorry. Can you say it again?
What's nonviolence mean? Cause the first time we was I met the mayor for Southfield in the room here.
Oh, cool.
For the first time.
I love that.
And I know God loves me. I'm taking my medication every. Oh, but my name is Tom.
Nice to meet you, Thomas. I only have a few more minutes. Can we talk after? All right. Thank you.
Do you refer to psychologists or psychiatrists?
As necessary, we have licensed counselors on staff. But if folks are seeking maybe medical diagnoses, maybe we get a lot of like CPTSD, complex PTSD, or PTSD, depression, anxiety, things like that. We do refer.
Like VA?
Oh, absolutely. And the VA has their own intimate partner violence modules and folks in. I will say, I know the VA coordinators. They're great people. The VA model is different than First Step's model about addressing intimate partner violence. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I just want to point out a difference that if, let's say, me and my partner, let's say I was an abuser, we're going to have the same person. They send both those people to the same person because they have one intimate violence coordinator, and their model is more focused on the perpetrator's abuse and about maybe the PTSD they experienced in the military, which I understand. But again, that is not excuses for abusing others. And so First Step, has often worked with survivors that have navigated the VA, and we're maybe not focusing on much of the accountability of holding perpetrators accountable, because we're talking about the mental, which is important. Like abusers, people who perpetrate violence need spaces to address their behaviors, right? But when we aren't necessarily holding them accountable and giving that survivor the space to address their experiences on that side, and that's not okay, even if it was because of X, Y, and Z, or what they're going through, is a little problematic.
I'd like to know, what kind of staff do you have? What kind of volunteers do you have?
Yeah.
Do they actually go to the home of the victim?
No, that's not safe.
They come to
Do you mind if I open
victims?
it? Come on.
Victims come to you, your staff doesn't go to them.
No, it is not safe for our staff to go into their homes. The only homes we would go to is our transitional housing homes, because we're paying for them. So we can go there to just check and offer services in home. But we have about 45 staff. A lot of them work in our 24-hour programming, shelter, helpline, crisis intervention. Our other staff are advocates and counselors. We have a half a dozen people out in the community offering services and intervention. And so there was another part of your question. You said, I want to know about your staff and how they meet survivors. So a lot of survivors since the pandemic actually are preferring virtual services. They don't have to figure out childcare. Wayne County has a huge transportation issue. We also have really high car insurance rates. I mean, the whole state does. But depending on your zip code, very high insurance rates. So them to be able to do virtual, Zoom, Teams, phone has been really nice. But we have in-person offices, Wayne, Plymouth, and Lincoln Park. Unfortunately, we just had to close our Detroit office. We're looking for a new space. There was asbestos, so we cut that one. But so that's how our
Are they
survivors
paid?
can reach.
Is your staff paid?
Oh,
for
yes.
The organization?
Yes. Yep. Most of our, over half our budget is wages. Oh, you sure?
Yeah, I don't know.
I had two of my close friends left husbands who were violent, and what struck me in both situations is that both of them went and lived with siblings. The one friend felt that being in a shelter would be traumatizing to her kids, but and in both cases, like the siblings started giving them a hard time also.
Yeah.
Like, your kids are too messy, or, it's like, I don't know what the answer is to that, but it just struck me that both of them dealt with it same, like
Yeah.
they're trying to find a good place to stay,
Yeah.
and they're dealing with
Yeah.
harassment.
Well, and unfortunately too, if those individuals would have reached out for shelter, the likelihood of them getting shelter is far and few between. For every intake we do, we turn away almost 100 individuals and families. Most of us do not take wait lists because we can't tell you when you're going, especially because of the housing crisis we're in right now, the affordable housing crisis, not let alone just finding available housing. All of these programs out in the community are being cut on the federal level, right? Or a lot of them are held up. And so when people call for shelter, that the likelihood of them getting shelter is slim to none in the state of Michigan. We turn away monthly 200 individuals and families, just to give context. So it's really about these wraparound services that I had up there to support with saying, like, well, who would you have called if not First Step, right? And then working through trying, First Step offers secondary services. So maybe those siblings would like to come in and talk about, what that person, their sister, brother, whoever it is going through, and how it's difficult to be a supporter when they're frustrated, seeing like, a lot of times there's unfortunate victim blaming of like, well, how'd you let it get this bad? Like, I would have saw this, like, I noticed this person was terrible from the beginning. Yeah, maybe from an outside perspective, you're seeing that, but what's going on in the inside? And now all of a sudden you're living together and you're raising children together and your names are on things together, right? It's a lot more complicated. And also, if someone started to just outright abuse us on day one at date one, yeah, I'm probably not going to say I want to date you, but that's not what's happening. We're seeing love bombing. We're seeing this honeymoon phase. We're seeing this intentional manipulation. It's so much easier to step back and say, oh, wow, now I look at this spectrum of experiences and there's good days in between, but then those bad days are bad, and now they're happening more frequently, right? And that was actually my last side, is that abuse looks really different, and it changes, and the abusers often will change their behaviors based off of what's working and what's not working. I can't speak on this very, very deep, but I just always want to take space, and like it's supporters that get burnt out, right? When they're seeing or they're trying to help and they just feel like they're seeing this cycle. But we can't be telling survivors, well, why don't you just leave? Just call a shelter, just call CPS. CPS looks at survivors in our state, and how their system is built says they look at the survivor and said, you failed to protect. Because they are not criminal investigators. They are not looking to say they believe domestic violence happens between the adults in the home. So that is a police matter. They are looking at, are the kids safe? And they look at that caregiver and said, well, you failed to protect. So when we say, why don't you just leave, just get a PPO, call the police, what does that look like for that survivor based off of the color of their skin, based off of how their relationship looks, how their partner looks, who they are in society, based off of the money they have, the resources they have access to, the zip code they're in? It looks different. And so we have to remember that based off of those experiences, their resources also look different, and the plans of actions they might have. And always remembering that if someone is able to try to leave or willing to try to leave, we must think about safety. We've seen it with Latricia Green at the Henry Ford Hospital. She tried to get a PPO. It wasn't served. It was petitioned. Reality is I still think he would have murdered her, PPO or not, but they were separated. There was a 22-year-old in Westland in, I think, August last year, who was murdered after she left her boyfriend. There was two 16-year-olds, I believe it was like Macomb County a year ago, where it was a suicide homicide, right? And so I can name off probably a dozen just from the last 18 months of people trying to leave their partners and getting murdered or post-separation abuse.
Is there
And I think while we have a little pause here,
Yeah.
wherever the pause is, I do want to honor everybody's time because some of us have to go on and do some stuff.
Mhm.
You can stick around here, right?
Yeah.
If people want to stay, that's fine. I want to point out a couple of things. This, of course, is the work of Jesus. Is Jesus lifted up in the Gospels, women and their stories and their journeys more than would have been common in that time. And this is one of the epidemics that we don't see. And so I'm very glad that you've come to be with us today.
Yeah.
I want to promote next week at this time, we're going to hear from Tom Russell, who's going to talk about boycotting Israel or not. Lutherans have, others have, Episcopalians haven't. It's a big debate. He's going to be here, same time, same place. And then finally, we as a congregation want to give you a check for your organization.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
We're so happy
Thank you
for what
so
you're
much.
doing. And I want to just give you a round of applause.
I appreciate it.
And anybody can go otherwise.
Absolutely. You're not going to disrespect me. And we're almost done too. So
let me ask, this is a sensitive question.
that's okay.
Is there a difference? Do you see a difference in the numerical activity between classes?
No.
Socioeconomic classes?
Economic classes?
No.
Yes.
No. It's just from a personal perspective, because I can't speak from a statistical, I just see the access to resources and the
I would think
believability changes.
The higher the class, economic class, the more resources they probably have available to them and more believability. Is that correct?
I would say in some cases, but then also now you add on difficulties of usually if you go to those higher classes, you have more things happening behind closed doors.
Sure.
And less, for example, we'll see survivors suffer because a lot of times those abusers have high power positions or positionality. So now they're using their resources too to go after survivors and deplete them of finances or just drag on court because they can, right? And so their troubles are just different. However, it can offer opportunities that a lot of our other survivors don't have. For example, there's a really popular case, Tatiana Saunders was a survivor. Turns out her abuser actually had abused before and continues to abuse, word on the street is. But he was the Wayne County financial officer. He was top dog in Wayne County and just got out of prison. But she was able to just up and leave one night and get her own place with her child because she had her own bucket of money from previous businesses she owned. And she recognizes how privileged she was to do that. And who knows if she would be here today if it wasn't for that. How many survivors do we know that can do that, right? Almost none.
I'm wondering if all of First Step's efforts go towards after the fact help, or is there anything that would be considered
great question.
preventative, or any studies that show what things
educate fun
people?
Fact, not very fun, but part of my job, education and engagement, the federal and state government will not pay for prevention. So we have to find our own money to fund that. So what First Step did is in 2020, they put me into a position and I created our Staff Speakers Bureau. And so now what we do is when we can, we charge people that do have budgets, right? So I have multiple contracts with GrowthWorks and the Third Circuit Court and things, and charging, $10,000 for a year of training so that we can go and do these presentations and trainings in schools, in civic groups to talk about, I just spoke with a women's ministry about sexual assault of children and exploitation and how to identify it and how to refer, right? So offering these trainings free of charge because I'm charging other people who have the budget.
So it's mostly education that is effective?
Yes, very early to disrupting cycles, talking about gender-based violence, talking about gender stereotypes. Even though we know men can be abused in other identities, we know that there's a big foundation of this movement that started with this idea of men being in charge and then women being submissive. And so we see that play out with intimate partner violence and be very misconstrued and misused, because we can still honor those if that's the type of roles folks believe in, but that doesn't mean that survivors should be emotionally, physically, or financially abused. So yes, education is mainly resources to provide early intervention, and then society. Actually, I have a slide on this. Oh, it's the next one. You just keep, yeah, you're doing great. But so first off, giving space for survivors to actually speak up and identify that they're being abused, and us believing them. How many times do we say, well, they're just such a nice person, I can't imagine that they're doing that, right? But I've never seen them do that, right? We almost check it. It's like when we're on social media and we're like, if we didn't see the video that it happened, and now we're like, it's probably AI, because I don't want to believe that happened, right? And so making space for survivors to actually say, and then believing it, holding a perpetrators accountable, right? Not making excuses for those behaviors, making sure our courts are holding them accountable and saying as a collective, we don't believe these things are okay to be happening. They shouldn't be misdemeanors. They shouldn't have plea outs. Promoting cultures of respect and dignity. So even, little kids, teaching them, like for example, I have a young daughter, and so I've trained my whole family that we don't ask if she wants to go to bed or ask if she wants her diaper changed, if that's what we have to do for her health and safety. So instead I'm informing her, this is what we're going to need to do, and where does she have choice? She has choice by, would you like to put your pajamas on first or brush your teeth first? Right? I'm not going to say, do you want to go to bed? And she says no, and I say, well, you're going to anyways. That's not teaching her boundaries, respect, or consent.
Is there ever an opportunity to work with law enforcement to educate
Always.
them?
We do. Yep. So we're actually embedded in 70% of the police departments in Wayne County. We do strangulation training, intimate partner violence training. We do roll calls in the morning to remind folks, and then they provide us a lot of their police reports, and we follow up with them.
I've never heard of your step before. Are you familiar with the Michigan Women's Commission?
Yes.
Lansing?
Yep.
Are they familiar with this stuff? Because if they aren't, we should.
Well, I believe so. Isn't there branches for different locations? Am I mistaken?
There's a branch in Wayne County, that's all I know of.
Yeah, so I think we speak with the Wayne County one, because Lansing themselves has their own provider, Eve. And then like Oakland County is Haven. Turning Point is Macomb, right? So every county almost, especially in lower part of Michigan, has their own providers, which I'm going to provide this document. So if you all ever want to find your local provider or someone else in Michigan or even beyond Michigan, domesticshelters.org has a beautiful searchable list. There you go, bud. And then MDHHS also lists us all as well, because we're all funded through them in some way. But our local counties, I usually can list them off if you have a specific county you're asking about. Like Livingston is La Casa.
I have to go,
That's fine.
but I want to tell you, I worked for the Ford Foundation for a while, but it's been a long time.
And they used to support us until they changed their philanthropic mission.
Well, they did, and then, but as you may guess, that happens periodically.
Yes.
And it has to do within the framework of, they are required by the state of Michigan, by the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, to do $150 million a year
Yes.
in the city of Detroit.
Gotcha.
Okay? They rarely accomplish that. Okay? I know that's still a fact.
Yeah.
So I can't give you, the people I work with are
They're no longer there. Yeah.
Okay? I'm 80 years old. I've been gone for 15 years. But you should follow up with them, because
I want to make sure we're not talking about the same, because we've
In New
worked with the
York.
Ford Foundation, but you're saying it's not affiliated with the Ford Foundation through like Michigan's Ford, because
That's
they
correct.
also call them
No,
Ford
no,
Foundation.
no. You have 5 Ford Foundations.
Gotcha.
Okay? The Ford Foundation of New York is the third
Of New
largest
York.
foundation
Okay.
in the world. Okay?
Okay.
It was founded by Edsel,
Okay.
and it has no family members on the board.
Gotcha.
Okay? It's a
Thank you.
freestanding But when it was created by Ford, it was required to put a certain amount back into New York, into Detroit,
Mhm.
which they didn't do for 30 years. And finally, one of the Ford family members brought it to the attention
Oh, wow.
of the Attorney General. So the Attorney General has an oversight
Of
requirement
this,
of
yeah.
this foundation.
That's funny that they don't have places. I could name off all these places that could. Well, if you guys, I didn't know if you guys wanted to keep this at the church in case.
Yeah.
Do you have someone that might want to refer? I also brought, well, one, I wanted to highlight if you guys like to dress up and support a good cause. We have survivor speakers. If you're drinkers, we have an open bar, plated dinner.
You've been around how many years?
In this domestic violence and sexual assault, 10. Oh, first step is almost 50. So this event, we have 650 people. We sell out usually every year.
So just look them up. Have your
Yeah.